Resilience Co-ordinator for SCVO and the third sector. My job is to go out and educate people in being that bit more cyber resilient, that little bit more scam aware, and just to make sure that you can live your best life digitally online in the best and safest way possible. I've got two co-hosts, Mike Smith from Police Scotland and Ian Murphy from CyberOff. I'm rubbish at reading bios, so I'm going to ask them both to introduce themselves, and then they'll hand back to me for a little bit of an introduction to this session. So, Mike, can I go to you next? You're on mute. There's always
someone was always going to do it. It was always going to be me. Yeah. Hi, afternoon, everyone. My name's Mike Smith from Police Scotland, cyber resilience team, sitting under harm prevention. So, like Alison, we work in cyber prevention and essentially going out and promoting good cyber. It's a horrible word, cyber hygiene, but also just promoting safety online. For business and for individuals, and we also have a crossover into the safety of young people as well. So a huge remit in relation to internet safety and cyber prevention. And I'll go back on silent.
Okay, Ian, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Hello, afternoon, everyone. My name's Ian Murphy. I'm the non-Scottish contingent. However, I did live in Edinburgh for a year and work in Rosyth Dockyard, and I did play junior football in Fife for Big Jim Leishman, and I've also been thrown out the Horseshoe Bar once as well. So I think that almost guarantees me a Scottish passport when you guys get your own passport, right? I'm sure it will.
Brilliant, thank you, Ian. It's great. It's great to have a Sassenach joining us here today. Now, this session is called Scammers and Schemers, and Mike and I started planning this a while ago, and we thought, oh, what are we going to talk about? We don't want to provide these people with a big long list of all of the scams that we've seen, that we know about, because it's a bit dull, it's a bit boring, it's actually a little bit scary as well, and a little bit dry. So we ummed and ahed as to how we were going to present this to you today. And then along came Ian. I've been aware of the work that Ian has been doing in the cyber education field for about a year now. He puts a lot of very good, very amusing cyber education videos on LinkedIn, which he shares to share good cyber messaging. But he does this in a very tongue-in-cheek, humorous manner. Some of them, I have to say, are not for the faint-hearted. They can be a little bit less than PG, should we say, but they do provide cyber education in a way that is funny and is accessible to people. It's almost like the holy grail of what us cyber education folk have been looking for, a way to engage really, really well. So I threw caution to the wind, and I take full responsibility for this because I see Inspector Mark Gallagher is on the call, who is Mike's boss. So Mark, this is really nothing to do with Mike. It's all entirely my fault, but we invited Ian along to share his views of what we need to know about cyber education, what we need to know about scamming, and really why we as humans fall for the con. And he will do this in his own unique, slightly amusing way. So anybody slightly faint-hearted, I'm not going to apologize, but I hope you will enjoy his content with the humor in which it is usually delivered. So I'm going to hand over to you, Ian. You've been told to play nice, play nice. On you go. Thank you.
I've spent the past hour swearing, so
get it out your system.
So everybody's fine. Don't worry about it. And if I do wear off after a while, it's fine. It really is.
Thank you.
Firstly, a little bit about why I think I do what I do. First off, who knew being a Scouser would be any kind of career at some point in the future? But I think looking at, especially when COVID-19 hit, I was part of a COVID-19 volunteer force and I was doing their threat intel for them. And I was providing information to NHS trusts across the country. And it was the same thing week in, week out. Don't click on this. This is a new type of scam. This is a new, and it was all delivered via the same type of routes, yet people were still falling for it. And it then kind of got me thinking, so this is where CyberOff has been born from. It largely aligns with what Alison's just said. It's really about helping people in their cyber savviness. I think nobody wants to be a cyber expert. Nobody wants to be a security expert. Nobody comes to work for that stuff, unless you're in security like I am. But people do need to be a little bit more aware, do need to have that spidey sense of how to spot an attack or a scam when it happens, because I'll get 3 or 4 of these calls a week from family and friends saying, hey, is this an attack? Is this a scam? And actually, when you know what you're looking for, when you've got a little bit more of that internal knowledge, it kind of helps. So that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to raise that savviness a little bit. So let's talk about, and let me share my presentation. Let's talk about why we do fall for this and what goes on. Bear with me 1 second. Right. So hopefully you guys can see the screen. It should say, are we stupid or what? And by we, it is the royal we, right? It's all of us. And what really kicked it off, as I say, was the COVID-19 side of things. When I started getting more involved in the information out that was being sent out there, because I've been in security around about 30 years now. And I know it doesn't look it, but I started really young in security. But I have been in security about 30 years, from Ministry of Defence, through vendors, through doing contracting and consulting and working for big SIs and small companies and startups, until I eventually got to CyberOff. And really what it got me thinking about, and I always think in analogies, it helps me understand stuff, right? It's just the way my brain's wired. I was watching the Hangover Part 2, hence the picture of Phil in the Hangover Part 2, where he's phoning up saying, I'm sorry it's happened again. It kind of got me thinking of why do we keep falling for the same things time and time again? You know, it's a common thing we hear. It's a common thing that we always get leveled at as around this common sense thing, because it then got me thinking, why is common sense not so common? Because everybody uses it, right? I used to get it every day of my life from my parents. That's common sense. So what are you doing that for? Don't be stupid, and all of that type of stuff. But actually, it's only ever really common sense if you know the answer. It's like watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. When they give you the answer, you go, oh yeah, of course of course it's the answer, because they just told you it. That's the same thing as common sense, right? And I think because we are human beings, because we are fallible individuals, to err is to be human, because we've got a bunch of inbuilt cognitive biases that dominate all our lives. So not to get too deep psychologically about it, because I don't want anybody to think I'm anything but shallow, but I do a little bit of reading in the background and try and understand the psyche of what goes on. But there's hundreds of cognitive biases, but there's 2 or 3 that come to the fore when dealing with things like phishing and how we fall for cons and things like that. One of the biggies that trips us up all the time is something called the confirmation bias. So the confirmation bias is where you look for other things to confirm your beliefs. So it's how thoughts happen, it's how movements grow on the internet, it's how religions are born and grow. It's based on that belief structure and people reinforcing that belief structure and doing that through many, many, many generations. And because of that, you then look for the things that support those beliefs and very rarely challenge the things that don't. So when somebody, for argument's sake, says, you need this type of product to sort this type of security situation out, people just believe that and go along with that and don't start questioning that kind of product or why they're installing this or the type of solution that they are trying to solve with it. And it calls to mind, again, another book I've read. I've read about 3 books in my life. I'm just going to bring them up in this presentation to show I'm well read. Is The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins, and he writes a letter to his daughter in The Blind Watchmaker talking about the 3 things not to be drawn into as evidence, which are revelation, authority, and tradition. And these are the 3 things that require questioning all the time. And I think it's the same when we're using normal life. And these are, again, part of, he calls them memes in his books, but they are cognitive biases, because everybody can fall for the con. There's a really great book out there called The Confidence Game by Maria Konnikova, not the tennis player, Konnikova, I think it is. And she talks about the con, the 5 different stages of the con, and she offers up elaborate approaches that people fall for when you're reading the book, and you're reading it and you're thinking, that's so obvious. How can people fall for that stuff? And the real issue here is that given the right bait, given the right type of research that the comperson or confidence trickster is doing, the majoritively men, right? But that the confidence trickster is doing, and the right type of emotional state that you're in, anyone can fall for the con. A really good friend of mine, a CISO, Kevin Field, who used to be at Just Eat, he's famous for saying we're only one click away from notoriety, all of us, and we all are, because we can all. I got a call the other day. It was an automated call. It was from Hmrc, or supposedly. It was an 0200 number, and I listened to the number. Please click on one. If you don't click on one, you've been charged with fraud, and there'll be a warrant out for your arrest. Now, I'm not unused to having warrants out for my arrests, right? Being a Scouser, I'm not unused to that, and having coppers on the call is slightly unnerving as well. But even though I knew that was a scam, even though I had my phone and I knew that that was a scam, I had to think twice, and it turned my stomach a little bit. And I'm thinking, if it does that to me, where I think I'm a little bit more experienced in, then what's it doing to people like my dad? You know, because I don't want to have to then rebuild my dad's PC after he's clicked on a bunch of links and downloaded stuff, and he gets on the phone to me and says, Ian, I can't start the PC. And I'm going to tell you something now. You never, ever want to see your parents' browsing history, right? So when you're rebuilding stuff, that is something that stays with you forever and a day. You don't want that stuff in your psyche. But some of the truisms that we have to deal with is that we do have sites that have bad code, or applications that have bad code, because there's vulnerabilities everywhere. And there's a million different reasons for that. But writing code is complex. Checking code, we all know from quality systems, checking something and looking at it is not a foolproof science, right? You will always spot something different. So bad code abounds, but really, it always gets me that people don't think that bad people will behave the way bad people behave, right? Because they do. You know, bad people are there. They're there to prey on society, and they've always been there, unfortunately. You know, ever since we've wandered off the savannas of Africa, there's been bad people who want to shortcut the state of hard work and trying to achieve something by not doing all that hard work. So they want to steal your kill or steal your berries that you've gathered, because that's what they do. It's inbuilt in them to do that. So we shouldn't be surprised when that happens. But I think what we're not doing at this moment in time, I think there's a gap that's ever growing, where we're not offering a simple, interesting way of getting people involved in understanding the attacks. We've really got people communicating it to others who should never be allowed to communicate anything, to be quite honest, with the way they put it across, because it's so dry and boring and people switch off, you know, and you need that engagement. And then when you then build in businesses into this, who are a living organism in and of themselves, you know, you've got them thinking that their staff have come to work to be a last line of defense after all the pennies they've spent on the toys and the technology has not worked. Then the human thing is going to be some kind of human firewall, which, by the way, is one of my most hated phrases ever. Whoever come up with that, I just want to give them a punch in the. Honestly, it's really, we don't come to work to be somebody else's backstop of technology. Most of us come to work to earn a pay packet so we can go on holiday once or twice a year when we can get out of the country or wherever we want to go and enjoy our family time and our work time. We're not there as a backstop, and we never seem to offer the answer to the what's in it for me, for the people who are supposedly going to protect the business, because businesses also, and we've seen it in the downturn, unfortunately, the first time stuff goes bad for businesses, the first thing they look to cut, not executive salaries, is to cut the people who are working for them. That's the first thing they look to cut. So to selfishly think that they're going to get those people enlisted with dry and boring content to protect them from some kind of scam is narrow-minded in my view and my experience as well. Some of the numbers to add to this, and this is about a year old, but there's always a year lag in these numbers that come out, so you have to wait until round about nowish, I think it is, that the 2020 figures will start coming out. Global crime is a big business. And you can see from the numbers there, 550 billion in damages. Now, if that's the cost of global crime, or the damages, what are the criminals making from this? And if we're spending less than a third on, or actually we're spending about 30-40% on average to try and combat that, there seems to be a disparity there, and there seems to be a massive opportunity for criminals. We're just asking them to come in and help themselves to the sweets in the sweet shop, you know. And then when you look at I think it's a really difficult thing to term what we do or what we're trying to do. I don't think it's awareness, right? Because I'm aware I should drink less, eat healthily, and exercise more, but I don't, and I haven't for a few years. I'm 50 in June. Be careful what you say now. I'm 50 in June, and I used to be an ex-professional footballer. I know I should do all of this stuff, but I don't. So just being aware of it isn't having it in practice, and I think that's why I like to call it cyber savviness. So it's almost like when you walk into a neighborhood that you've never been in before, and you know, oh, it doesn't kind of feel quite right. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up and things. It's having that type of approach to being online and being safe online, because when you consider that, and people trot this out as if we're to blame for this, right? People trot the 90% breaches involve humans. Of course they do. Of course they do, because we're fallible. We're going to make mistakes. Links are made to be clicked, for crying out loud. And don't ever let anybody tell you any different. That's what they're there for. I think we need to start working harder in helping people understand what is a good and what is a bad link, and how they can spot the differences between. And I'll now hand over to Mike, where he's going to pick up.
Yeah, I was just really wanting to pick up there on, you were mentioning bad people. I mean, I think being a cop with 30 years service, it's sometimes hard to get your head around some of the jobs that you see coming in, and members of the public would be aghast if they saw some of the things. But I mean, we are dealing with organised criminals here. They're not disorganised. They are well organised. They're dealing in frauds. They're dealing in cybercrime, human trafficking, all the rest. And yeah, just they are out to make the same money that we are all trying to do, but in a different way. And once you realise that, yes, there are bad folk. I still remember having about 3 or 4 years service and walked along Princess Street in Edinburgh, and the cop that I was with stopped a group of folk and then was chatting away to them and introduced them and shook their hand and was asking how they were doing, how the kids were doing. And the last question he was asking was, so you still working full time? And there's a bit of laugh and a joke, and he went away. And I'd shake their hand as well. And I said, who was that then? He said, they're travelling criminals that have come up shoplifting from Glasgow, and they're professional career criminals. I couldn't believe this. That was what they were there to do. That was their full-time job. And just kind of getting your head around that sort of thing. So yeah, understanding that, yeah, there are people who wake up in the morning and unfortunately spend the rest of the day trying to get money out of us.
I think I'll pick up now, and without getting into doom and gloom and lists of scams, I'm going to give you a list of scams. No, when we at the start of the pandemic, a group of myself, the Scottish Government, Police Scotland, Scottish Business Resilience Centre came together quite quickly because we recognised there was a gap in the market for sharing information around scams, around cybercrime, because when the pandemic hit, so did the scammers. And it happened almost overnight. We started producing the Cyber Resilience Bulletin. If you're not signed up for the mailing list to get that, it's now a monthly publication. I would encourage you to do so, because it's got some fascinating information in it. And it's very good at keeping you aware of what was happening. But prior to doing this presentation, I took a reflective look over I think we're up to about 26 editions now, over the scams that we were reporting on, and we were telling people to be aware of this. And it's absolutely fascinating, and I will go through it because it's quite marked, how the scammers moved as the pandemic moved. When the pandemic first hit and we were hearing on the news There was concerns about PPE supplies. Very, very quickly, your scammers were on the internet, putting up websites, sending out emails saying, we have facilities to provide you with PPE. Now, the government couldn't get PPE, so how these scammers felt that they could, but they were out there, they were trying to promote that they had these supplies and were making it available to members of the public. Now, you clicked on that link, they would either harvest your credentials, your username and password to use to try and get into other websites that you may use the same ones on, or they took your debit, credit card details and basically stole your money. But it was quite fascinating. The first thing that we saw was PPE scams. Counterfeit PPE that was available on the internet very, very quickly as the pandemic started. Then getting into April and the job retention scheme, and things started coming out from the government as a way to support businesses, organizations who were trying to find their way through managing the pandemic. That became the next scam. There was a Hmrc job retention scam, tax refund scams. Hmrc is actually the #1 organization in the UK for scammers that is impersonated by phishing attempts, by these texts that you get on your telephone that look quite legitimate. Hmrc is one of the biggest organizations to be represented by the bad guys. We got into towards the end of April, there was fake Zoom meeting links being sent out there. That was an attempt to get your passwords. And if you are like me, or what I used to do before I started doing this job was using the same username and password for multiple websites, that's really bad practice, because if the bad guys get hold of your username and password once, they can use it to put it into other websites where they may be able to monetize what it is that you do. So they're very keen at all times to try and get this sort of information from you. We've seen an increase in mandate fraud. This is when an organization who has a particular supplier gets a note allegedly from that supplier saying, we provide you with a particular service. We're going to invoice you on the 30th of the month, but we have changed the bank account details. It comes in completely legitimately looking from the organization that are your supplier, but it's a cyber criminal who is actually mimicking the supplier, changing the bank details in the hope that you will just basically accept this as gospel and pay the money into this new bank account. Now, that very much took advantage of the different processes that we were having to work with during the pandemic. If I'm in the office and I've got an invoice that comes in for more money that's Alison spent on biscuits or gin or something or another, I look at my invoice, sign it off, take it up to finance, and go, that's perfectly okay to pay. But those processes were broken. We were all working from our bedrooms or whatever, and cyber criminals really took advantage of the things that we were having to do differently to try and get into the cracks and really steal our money from whatever way, shape, or form they could. Another thing that we saw sort of mid-May time, and again, it's such a trigger on the old emotions. A lot of people during lockdown were very interested in getting pets. They wanted a fairy little friend to accompany them in their hours of quietness. We saw a huge amount of pet scams out there on the internet. People, organizations promoting that they had puppies or kittens or dogs to sell to people who genuinely were looking for that. And these animals just did not exist. It was a scam to get your money off of you. I've got a statistic here. There was a combined total of just shy of 300,000 that was lost to citizens who were looking to buy pets over the pandemic, that were just conned by bad guys saying they had pets that weren't available. We've seen TV licensing scams. We've seen all of the major supermarkets free money scams. We've seen Cadbury's free chocolate scams. I did fall for that one. Says more about me than anybody else, I think. The other thing that we've seen when we started, when the football season started again and Premier League football was streaming, we saw scams wanting people to log onto their Sky account, stealing the money that way. Online concerts, when people were donating to charity to watch very, very good 80s pop music on a Saturday night. I was personally impacted by a scam where the donation links on the Facebook page that this scam was happening was overtaken by a cyber criminal, and actually the donations you thought you were giving to a particular charity were being siphoned off because they'd managed to change the links, which is pretty rubbish. So we've seen it all. The bounce back scheme, there's a lot of scams around that. There was the Amazon Prime subscription scam, the fake government helpline. There was a Zoom scam where there was a recorded message on Zoom, which you phoned up to pick up your message and basically ended up dialing a premium number, which cost you an awful lot of money to collect a message that didn't exist. When we were allowed out the house again, holiday scams were a massive thing. We read in a couple of the newspapers about people who ended up going to caravans in various places that were a long, long way away from home. And when they got there, these properties did not exist. They had been scammed, unfortunately. And there are a very, very long list of things that I could tell you, but I don't want to upset you and frighten you. This stuff, as I said, happened so quickly and moved to really mimic what was happening in the pandemic. It was so responsive. And the other thing, it was actually very, very legitimate looking. Phishing these days, we talk about phishing, these emails that come out that you get from your bank or from Amazon or from heavens knows who, are incredibly realistic. And anybody who does click on a link in one of these really must be forgiven because they are so well crafted. And yeah, you could be persuaded into action very, very easily with these. So, Mike, I'm going to hand back to you. Is there anything that Police Scotland are seeing at the moment that we need to make these guys aware of?
I think we've just, I've said for a good few months, essentially the Rishi Sunak is our briefing officer, or sort of almost is at the minute, whatever comes out, be it a furlough, be it bounce back loan or something similar. It is, as you said there, it's incredible how quickly the turnaround comes, and we can almost speak the next morning about it, or as you said as well, things are opening up a bit. We're moving from level 2 to 3 or back down again, and there's the opportunity for holidays, and then very quickly there's going to be holiday scams. So yeah, I think it's just about seeing what is being released and then just trying to pay attention to does the deal seem too good? I know that sounds dead simple, but it's simple messaging and just understanding that there is a possibility that this isn't correct. So, but yeah, I think coming around the corner is, again, the vaccine. We are seeing vaccine scams. The majority of these seem to be emails or texts that take you to a link, and it's, can you pay $1.99? Some of them are very small amounts, like $1.99, maybe up to about £10. Just for you to register, but that's essentially where we are at the minute. There are still some of your more everyday scams and the ones we've seen, but essentially at the minute it's very much COVID based.
Yeah, I think I've just noticed a note from Jacqueline who says, if it's good to be true, it usually is. Yeah, that is an absolute gem of a thing to live by. Think about it. And the other thing that we do, or we advise people to do, is take 5 minutes just to consider the information that is being presented to you. Does it feel too good to be true? Does, as Ian says, does it make your gut tingle? Is it making your spidey senses going, I'm not very comfortable over this? The thing with mandate fraud that we recommended to people was when they got that email in from that supplier that said, please pay this different bank account. Take a couple of minutes to go away, find the telephone number of the organization that are asking you to change the bank details, phone the contact that you have there, not using the details on the invoice, something separate, and just ask the question of them. Say, have you sent this out to us? And spending that couple of minutes to do that double check may be the difference between your company being defrauded out of an awful lot of money. So always take 5, think about what you're being asked to do, and if it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
I think there was an opposite way of thinking about it as well in relation to getting bills sent out. Is when you get a bill sent out, you're fuming, you want to find out, and you may want to click on the link. More recently, or certainly at the start of COVID, it was we owe you money. So all of a sudden you're in better spirits, you're not quite as angry, and you might be there might be an opportunity to click on that and just see, am I really due this £750 furlough refund. And it's not till you think about you weren't even on furlough. And then once you think, hold on, I wasn't even furloughed, so how would I got this? But yeah, I think appealing to people's happiness essentially by, hold on, I'm going to get something here, was another way that was done. Yeah,
we've seen a lot of HMRC refunds coming out this year that aren't. HMRC will never text you, they will never phone you, they will never email you. Anything from HMRC comes via the post.
Yeah, and I mean, earlier on, I was in a presentation earlier on, had my phone on silent like I did at the minute, and I had 5 missed calls. Now, 5 missed calls when I was in the presentation, 2 calls when I came out, and they were both from Auto Assist from somewhere abroad who were asking about the car crash that I'd been involved in. So, I mean, that's 7 calls in a really short period of time that I've already had today. So, yeah, it is non-stop at the minute, or it certainly feels that way.
Okay. Ian, will we hand back to you, and you can tell us a little bit about your philosophy about making cyber education fun.
Sure. I just want to pick up on a few points there.
Fabulous.
I know if I'm going to launch an attack against you, Alison, it has to be 80s and chocolate related, right? So
I'm a scoosh. I'm yours.
and gin. So I know I have to do that, but it's a really valid point, right? Because we give away masses of data about ourselves online all the time, and we don't realize we're doing it, and I've made posts before to educate around, let's play what's your superhero name? Let me have the name of your first pet and your mother's maiden name and the street you were born on and things like that. And scammers use this stuff to gather that type of information, or what's your hacker name? And again, the month of your birth. And so there's lots of different ways where you can get that information without actually trying too hard about it. Also as well, is that things to watch out for. The too good to be true is a really good litmus test. However, it fails when you're in a terrible emotional state, because this is where the gambler's fallacy comes in, right? It's another cognitive bias. And what happens is that if you are financially strapped and you see a get-rich-quick scheme and you want to go for that, you're going to think that because you're financially strapped and you've lost this money on the last scheme or the scheme before, this one's got to be true. This one has to, and has as somebody who's lost £1 million live on TV, right? So I lost £1 million on a game show called Anto Deck's Red or Black, if you remember that, back in 2012. And it was a game of red or black. You made a choice, and one person got the chance to choose red or black for £1 million. Well, I chose red because I'm a Liverpool supporter, and the previous 2 nights were different colours. And I'm thinking, well, it's got to be. So again, it's the gambler's fallacy and the cognitive bias in play, even in what is an entertainment programme, rather than me losing £1 million. I didn't have it to begin with, but that's why I'm here talking to you guys now and not in Barbados. I'll be quite honest with you. When we also think about passwords as well, and everybody does it, and people say, get a password manager. Now, for people like my dad or people who are not in IT or things like that, that can be a very complex and very daunting thing. And I used to scoff at password books previously, right? I used to think, how crazy are they? But when you think about it, the threat to a password book is largely somebody breaking into your house and stealing that passport book from the drawer or under the bed or round the corner where you put it and actually finding that stuff. So, and my mum used to keep everything in a book before she passed away. She used to keep dates of birth and passwords and account numbers. Actually, come to think of it, was my mum a hacker? Maybe she was. I'd never thought of it about that before, but maybe that's where I get it from, right? But this all goes on in my tiny little brain around trying to help people understand it. So when we come back to, and I'll share my screen again, when we come back to the idea of why we need to make awareness, or whatever it is, cyber savviness, why we need to make it fun, is because it helps people understand that stuff. It helps people remember certain things about it. Now, I can tell you more or less every Billy Connolly sketch, right? He's an absolute hero of mine from the early days of the Gallagate sketch he does around the 30 pieces of silver, to his more modern stuff. And I've seen him live and stuff like that. And the guy just makes things memorable. He just talks about normal life and he puts his weird lateral spin on it, you know, and it's kind of got me thinking, actually, if I can remember that, or if I can remember every single word of the life of Brian, because I've seen it so many times, surely that's a way that you should be thinking, you know, is he the Messiah or is he just a very naughty boy? You know, so when we start thinking about that, the solution for awareness has to come with engagement. We can't just put stuff out there and expect people to watch it, or even worse, if you tell them they've got to watch it, you've got to give them a reason to watch it, because otherwise they'll watch it on whatever device, or whilst they're in work or whatever, they'll pay lip service to it, and it'll be gone out of the brain 5 seconds later. So you've just wasted 30 odd K with whichever awareness provider you've just chosen to go with, because actually they're still going to fall for the phishing tests that you put them under. There's still something strange when organizations fish their staff to try and prove that they're prone to phishing. There's a weird argument there that it still doesn't quite compute in my very simple mind. So when I talk about the solution, about engagement, about humor, about all of that stuff, I think being brave is a prerequisite for it, because you can bet your life attackers care not one jot whether they offend you. They care not one jot about your sensitivities and your sensibilities. They care not one jot about how upset or offended you are when they have taken what they want from you, whether that be your life savings, whether that be your identity, whether that be your Google password, or whatever it may be. They care not one jot. Yeah. If I put a video together that uses the F word or the S word, people go, "Oh my God, you can't say that in front of people." I'm thinking, I want to do, when we're all out of lockdown, I want to do a presentation where we're all in a room somewhere, and I do the stand-up game, where I get people to stand up and then get them to sit down by asking them a series of questions. Who hasn't swore today? Who hasn't had an inappropriate thought? Whose friend hasn't sent them an inappropriate joke on WhatsApp? And things like that, and run through them all. And if there's nobody standing at the end of the room, at the end of the questions, it's a room full of liars, because actually we all get that in our normal daily life. So it's almost as if somebody is protecting a corporate entity from that corporate entity being spoke about in less favorable ways, when we need to rethink that training organization. We need to rethink it in the way of, let's turn it on its head. Let's give the benefit of helping people improve their cyber savviness, and by extension, their family, their friends, their parents, their kids, whatever it may be, their network, give them that benefit. Because as soon as you start teaching this stuff to other people, it becomes ingrained. It's a magic of learning and teaching it to other people. And then you're going to get people who are protecting the business without having ever to be asked, without having to sit an awareness test, without having to go through the yearly compliance nose of ticking that box that we've done the training, let's move on. You've got a better savvy workforce. Does it stop there? No, it doesn't, because it's an arms race. We're always in that where the attackers are 3 or 4 steps ahead, and we've got to catch up. And when we've caught up, they'll be 3 or 4 steps ahead as well. So we've always got to keep on top of that. And that's where I find micro learning is useful as well. If you give them little and often, that's not every week, but maybe one thing a month where you're talking about stuff and you back it up with interesting information, then that seems to work well with the people I work with currently, and it gets a lot of good response. It also keeps me on my toes, where I've got to be a bit more funny and original than the last time. If you ask any of my friends, by the way, they'll tell you I'm not funny. That's one of the best things about having friends. They bring you right down to earth straight away, especially my friends. And when we talk about the different types of content, now you can see this content on LinkedIn. They still haven't banned me from LinkedIn, the damn fools. And you can also see it on YouTube as well. So if you search for CyberOff on YouTube, or if you're not on LinkedIn, search for CyberOff on YouTube, or go onto LinkedIn and look for Ian Murphy. There's a couple of us actually. There's two of us who have beards and grey hair, and we're both in security. The other one looks like Gandalf. I look like George Clooney with a slightly longer beard, just in case you were wondering. At least I'm sticking to that story, right? My wife's having none of it, but I'm sticking to it. So I come at it from short videos, right? Short videos that are impact, and short videos that have a lot of information in them, but that you can keep coming back to time and time again. I'll do songs, I'll make up syndromes, I'll do silly cyber workouts, I'll dress up in silly outfits and put on my smoking jacket and silk scarf and things like that, just in the name of humor. I'm not a frustrated comic, honestly, but it grabs attention. It brings people in, and in that 3 or 4 minutes, there's many different layers to it that helps them come back. So it's never boring at the same time. In fact, somebody on this call said about one of my videos where I said to them, I won't mention your name, Alison, where I said to them, see, I can do a clean video. And Alison came back and went, yeah, apart from that one thing in that slide where you put, and there was a choice website in there that I'd snuck in, and I totally forgot about it. But those are the things that keep people interested and keep them coming back for more, and allow them to show them to other members of their family. You know, I have parents who show these things to their teenage kids. Their teenage kids think it's brilliant. Probably they think it's brilliant because I've gone out of my mind, maybe. But you know, they get value out of it because you can then do other stuff like storyboards. You know, I put together a bunch of different kids' short stories where they all had a dark ending, but that kind of dark ending seemed to resonate. I'm not killing anybody here. I'm not stealing anybody's thing, but it helps hammer home a point, especially when you're trying to maybe do, say, a monthly thing on the dangers of social media or the dangers of having bad passwords. And you can build this up and help people understand it even more, because then you follow it up with posters. Somebody said to me, how did you get these on train stations? I wish I did. I've just superimposed them on a billboard on a train station. Could you imagine going past, pulling into Waverley Station and seeing that? Aren't you thinking, aye, somebody's gone mental in the marketing department? But you know, it's those type of things. It becomes impactful. I have thought about it, by the way, and it helps. It helps further helps people understanding. And then most training and awareness needs some kind of certificate, right? Most training and awareness, it's not enough to watch the videos and get something out the videos and talk to other people about them and share the posters about and things like that. The company, for whatever reason, wants a certificate. And I keep saying to companies when they say, hey, let's have a certificate for this, it's like, well, you know, that's no more useful than the certificate I got as a 10-year-old kid for jumping in the deep end of my local pool with my pajamas on to rescue a rubber brick, right? So it seems to be that they think they have to give this as a validation of it, but actually you can do it in different ways, and you can add different types of quizzes to it. I did this in the very beginning of lockdown just to keep me from going potty, but to also for the people who joined the quizzes, to help them break the monotony, to have a beer of a Friday and just kick back and not worry about stuff. And you know, so there's things like music quizzes. We did junk folder bingo. You know, we did a play your cards right. I wanted to do bullseye, but I wasn't sure how to do that over a Zoom call, I'll be honest with you. Just so I could say, you've got your bus fare home, or super smashing great, just so I could say that stuff. And I know I'm reliving my childhood here. I fully understand that. But there's really fun and interesting ways, if you just want to put a little bit of thought into it, that you can get people to engage more. Because I always get the question, well, why doesn't everybody do this if it works? I think there's two real reasons. I think one of the benefits is that positive emotional reaction. As I've mentioned before, if you're doing this stuff and you're helping people to improve their cyber savviness, because that emotion of humor opens up the pathways for learning. Where people have done it in the past is they've tried to scare the living daylights out of people, right? And they've tried to use fear to do it. And we all remember this as kids, or some of us do remember this as kids, the Tufty adverts, the Green Cross Code man, the Charlie Says stuff. It was all about the dangers of doing that. It was all put over in, if you run out in front of it, you're going to get squashed by a car and all that type of stuff, right? I won't mention the other swimming thing in Clunk Click because we can't mention that stuff anymore. But it was all about fear, and fear's draining. As an emotion, fear is draining, especially during times like this. If you try and scare people into doing stuff, they've got enough fear and problems at the moment that they're just surviving day to day, right? So you have to tap into happier emotions, and you have to open them up to sneak in the messaging. So you have to be a bit more innovative. And I think most people don't do it because of offense. and it's the big elephant in the room, right? Offence is the massive element in the elephant in the room, is that people, I had somebody say to me the other day, can't use your stuff, it's inappropriate. And that's okay. I get that. I know I'm not for everybody. I'm not egotistical enough to think I am. But it got me thinking, what was the inappropriate bit about it? I didn't want to enter that conversation because it would sound as if I'm trying to defend it, and I don't need to defend it because I know it works, because it works with a lot of other organizations. But I'm thinking, what is inappropriate about it? Is it inappropriate that you fish your staff, trip them up, and then lambast them for it? Alison, you mentioned something earlier on where you need to be a bit more compassionate about when people click on these links. And we really do. We need better emotional, we need a better EQ, not a better IQ. We need the emotional quotient rather than the intelligence one. We need to show some compassion, because nobody goes out to make a mistake. Nobody goes out to make an idiot of themselves, apart from myself, but nobody intentionally wants to do that. And I think when you are thinking about that inappropriateness or that offensive side of things, you need to start thinking, well, is it then inappropriate that you're allowing your staff, by not giving them the stuff that would truly engage them, it would allow them to be scammed whilst they're using the customer's devices, the company's devices? Is it inappropriate that you are making it easier for attackers to gain access to your network, and then when they gain access to your network, you'll then blame the people that allowed them to gain access to your network, because you're not that prerequisite of being brave? Because it's attributed to Einstein, but it's never been proven that Einstein said it. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different outcomes is the very definition of insanity. And that's currently where we are in the awareness sector. We are doing the same things. In fact, we're getting worse at it. We're talking to adults as children, right? We're talking to adults using sock puppets. Now, I use sock puppets in one of my videos, but go and watch it. You know, it's not a talking down to adults video. Go and have a look. But we're using puppets or muppets. We're using cartoons, drawn cartoons. We're trying to infantilize the approach of cyber. And again, that's switching people off. It's not getting them engaged. And we're using the same messaging, but kind of trying to use the same medium as we have before, but do it in a slightly different way. So we're not engaging the people. We're not drawing them in. We're not giving them a reason to stay. They're going to see the first cartoon and think, yeah, that's innovative. I enjoy that. After the fourth one, they're going to go, yeah, not interested in that anymore. Or the puppets, yeah, I don't need to be spoken to as if I'm a child anymore, and I don't need to be done through somebody who's got the hand inside some kind of material animal, you know. By the way, how has Rod Hull never been arrested? That's my question. It's a question to everybody. I just don't know.
I'm just going to move this on. This feels like a really...
I thought I'd leave you on one controversial question, Alison.
Feels like a really good point to open up the floor for some conversation about what we've learned today. Anybody like to make any comments on what we've shared with you?
I was just wanting to say, and I think you're absolutely right. It's essentially good emotional marketing. It's jumping on people's emotional sense rather than just saying do and don't. I think you've got to think back to good marketing and the Tango advert, for example. You know, a guy getting walloped in the face with a rubber glove, and yet that was for Tango. A guy sitting getting his photo taken in a photo booth, and it was for a Hamlet cigar. And we all remember these. And you know, the Tango one even went around playgrounds, etc. and stuff. So it's about, getting something that's catchy, that people will remember. And you've only got to look at the posters around workplaces, you know, don't do this, please watch who follows behind you. There's nothing at all. I mean, you know, the minute you see them, you've forgotten them instantly. But you put something catchy up there, possibly like one of your posters, I'll say possibly like one of your posters in a stairwell, and I guarantee you people will pay far more attention to it than the constant don't, and watch your back. So I think it's really interesting, the different angle.
Yeah, it's really intriguing, actually, because if you say people don't all the time, you're daring them to do it, right? You're almost daring them to do that stuff. Why can't I do that? You know, man, don't stick your hand in the fire, son. Well, I didn't, but you know, it's that kind of dare from your parents, and unless we start to think differently about that, I think we're still going to get the same outcomes as we've got previously.
Yeah, I think it's about taking the content that we've got and just trying to make it that wee bit more interesting, wee bit more humorous, while staying on topic. Obviously, being in the police, there's certain restrictions that we've got. But I mean, I think of some of the presentations we've done internally as well, and just think we could look at things slightly differently. And yeah.
Bringing things back to police advice, is there anything that anybody wanted to ask on scams? I mean, we've shared some information about scams that you need to be aware of. Is there anything that you want to quiz Mike about whilst we have him here to shine the light in his eyes?
No, good, thank you.
Yeah, no, most people had just examples of their own scams, so it was very much mirroring the ones that Alison gave examples of and similar ones that we've all seen. So we had a chat in the chat about where we can report these things. So I've posted a couple of links to things like that, and we'll send out the video of this recording as well as those links after the session.
So there's some NCSC stuff there, Siobhan, but just to ask Mike, if I phone 111, would they be able to give me some advice, or would they direct me somewhere else? Or
if you phone 101 for advice, yeah, you'd be phoning 101 for Police Scotland, and also we wouldn't be contacted. I know that some of the literature that comes out from the NCSC also says to contact action, fraud, etc. But all crimes are reported, or all incidents are reported to 101, and we deal with that. And whether it got forwarded to an operations team if it was a crime, or whether it got forwarded to us for advice. But yeah, it's 101 for reporting to Police Scotland.
I mentioned earlier on the Cyber Resilience Bulletin, which we put out monthly now. That's a really good source of information for current really scams. Good. If you're not on the mailing list for that, drop either myself or Siobhan a note and we'll get you added to that. Other sources of really good information, there's a trading standards newsletter which comes out weekly. I think there's a witch newsletter that comes out weekly. There's a fraud against charities group down in England. And there's a whole new scams prevention strategy that the Scottish Government are working on at the moment. There's a lot of information there to help you to make sure that you're that little bit more aware, and you've got the information that you need yourself and that you can educate your friends and family too. So that, yeah, don't feel that you're ever out there on your own. Citizens Advice as well are a good source of support and advice for this sort of stuff too.
Also, as Mike says, there's some slightly different reporting when you're in Scotland. So do keep an eye on the new cyberscotland.com website, which is the website by the New Cyber Scotland Partnership. And all of their information will be Scottish specific for all of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm aware that we're getting very, very close to the witching hour when Ian turns into a pumpkin.